Hey, shalom, shalom from your Dutch Uncle John. It's been a while since we talked, but I thought I'd do a video on, which version of the Bible is the best to use. Some say King James, some say the NIV, the nearly inspired version, some say whatever. But I find that all of them have errors and omissions that aren't right, and we want to know exactly what God is saying to us. So I think the best version would be to go back to the original Hebrew and see what it says. And let's look at that. And not only will there not be omissions and errors, but there'll be special, secret, hidden blessings that will just blow you away. So we'll just start in the first verse of the Bible. And I don't know how far we'll get tonight, but we'll see if you learn anything new. So we're in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. I'm reading from the New King James. And verse 1 says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." Before we look at it in Hebrew, you're going to have to learn a couple Hebrew letters. And so if I have here the whole Hebrew alphabet for you to look at, and I know it's all kind of small on the screen, but let's just take note of the different columns and what Hebrew consists of. The Hebrew alphabet has 22 letters. The first letter is, you see how I have them listed here. In fact, I've got a smaller version of this where you can see it. Here's just like the first three letters. The first letter is an aleph. It has the modern view of the aleph and how you say the letter. The sound that it makes, it would be more of an A sound, although some argue that it's a silent letter, but it always seems to make the A sound when it does appear. Then it has an ancient Hebrew, or the original Hebrew, Paleo Hebrew they call it. The aleph, its picture is an ox head, okay, and it represents strength. It's God's letter, it's first. And every Hebrew letter also has what's called a gematria. Gematria is just a word for meaning geometry. And the geometry numbers will tie in soon, and they will also blow you away. Okay, so the first letter, let's just look at aleph for a bit. An aleph, the ancient picture is the head of an ox. You can see an ox's head. It's got horns. Okay, it looks like an ox's head. And you know what? If you turn the thing upside down, to me it looks like the letter A. That's where we get the letter A. You're going to see that everything came originally from the Hebrew. God was first. The aleph, this is his power. He's aleph. He's first. He's the strength. He's the ox. You get the picture. Aleph. It's all important, and he uses aleph to begin a lot of very important words. His name, his title, Elohim, Adonai, which means Lord. That is also begins with an aleph. When Moses is up on Mount Sinai, and he says, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but Eya, Ashur, Eya, I am that, or which I am. Those all begin with aleph. The Ten Commandments begin with an aleph. So aleph is a pretty important letter. Okay, it's maybe the most important letter. The second Hebrew letter is the beit. And I have it here in 3 different fonts. I'm showing you them all in different fonts just so you're familiarize yourself with it. The beit is the second letter. Its gematria value is 2. And a beit, its picture is a house or a tent. You can even see, you go in the house, you go around the corner, and you're in the room. That is a beit. Okay? You've probably used the word beit before. In Hebrew, the word for bread is lechem. And you put beit and lechem together, you get house of bread. And you've used this word beit lechem. It's Bethlehem, house of bread. You know, it's funny, Jesus says, I am the bread of life, and where's he born? He's born in the house of bread. Pretty cool. Okay, so now you have two Hebrew letters. You have the Aleph, which is strength. You have the Beit, which is house. And now we're going to talk about our first Hebrew word. The first Hebrew word in a Hebrew dictionary is the word Aleph Beit. That's how it's spelled. It's pronounced Abba or Av. It's interesting the way Hebrew works. You know, some languages are phonetic in nature. For example, English. You have the word C-A-T. You can pronounce it, but there's no clues in there what it means. It's cat, okay. In Chinese, it's a picture-based language. Picture-based language, you see this character, if you know Chinese, it's a drawing, you know what it is. It's a four-legged animal that says meow. What you don't know is how to pronounce it. There are no clues for pronunciation. Hebrew, being God's language, it's both. It's picto-based and phonetic. So you have Aleph Beit, you can pronounce it Abba or Av. And to define it, you look at the two pictures. The strength, Aleph, of the Beit, of the house. Who is the strength of the house? Answer is the Father. That's what Abba is. You get it? And remember the little gematria values? Well, Aleph is 1, Beit is 2. The whole word adds up to 3. There's a triune nature to Abba. A new letter we're going to learn is the Resh. This is down near the end of the alphabet, and it's the R sound. You realize Hebrew reads right to left. We read left to right. You can see the Resh. If you turn the language around, the Resh becomes our letter R. The modern Resh definitely becomes our modern lowercase r, and the uppercase R is the old paleo head picture. You turn that around, that looks like an R. Yes? And Resh represents head. Okay? So now we're going to look at a new Hebrew word, because we have two new letters. We have the Beit, which Beit was house or tent. By the way, if you spin that Beit 90 degrees, I can see it's the letter B. It comes from there. You know, God was first on everything. The Aleph was upside down A. The B is a spun. Okay, the Resh is flipped over. You'll see that all these letters that we have, God was first on all of them. So, Beit Resh, you can pronounce it. It's bar. Okay, and its definition is where you have a house and you have head. The head of the house. Who is the head of the house? Now, you might say the Father, but the Father is the strength of the house. Remember, we're trying to get into God's kind of thinking. And so his thinking, the Beit Resh, the bar, the head of the house is the Son. And you know, you've heard the word bar before. A 13-year-old Jewish boy, he has his bar mitzvah. When you become bar mitzvah, you become bar, son, of the mitzvah, of the law. You have to start following the 613 laws that are in the Bible. Okay? So, we now have two words. We've learned bar and we've learned ab. Pretty cool. How easy. In the New Testament, remember whenever Jesus is taken before Pilate, and Pilate doesn't want to prosecute him, and he's trying to find a way for him to get off, and all of a sudden, he remembered. It's the Passover, and we have a tradition on the Passover that we can always release one prisoner. And so he asks the crowd, who do you want me to release? And of course the crowd all yells, free Barabbas, free Barabbas. They were prompted to do so. Well, that guy Barabbas, listen to his name, Bar-Abbas. And what is Barabbas? Bar is son, Abba is father. They're yelling, release Barabbas, release son of the father. I can see Jesus sitting there and he's hearing, release Barabbas, release Barabbas. He's getting excited, you know, except that he sees the guy next to him and says, why are you so excited? And he says, my name is Barabbas. Anyway, you've used these words before, so you might as well get used to them. You know, you'll have a lot of people who will say, oh, bar is not a Hebrew word. Bar is Aramaic. The word in Hebrew for son is Ben, as in like David Ben-Gurion, the first president of Israel, or Ben-Hur, you heard the movie, son of Hur. And it is, Ben is the word for son, but bar is also a word for son. Psalm 2, he says, kiss the son lest he be angry. And he uses the word bar. So it is a Hebrew word. It shows up in Hebrew, you know. Plus, I've never been invited to a ben mitzvah. Okay, new letter. The letter is the yod. I put an underline underneath the yods because you'll notice the yod is the only Hebrew letter that does not touch the ground. It floats up above like an apostrophe. And yod is its value is 10, gematria value, and it's a picture of a hand. The Hebrew word for hand is yod. Okay, it begins with a yod, and you can see a hand. I don't know. Here's the elbow and the hand, right? There's the elbow. Here's the thumb sticking up. It's a hand, and it represents a hand or work. Our letter Y comes from that. It's pretty obvious to me that that's where that came from. So we got. It's interesting that God, his names, the names of important things of his, begins with yod. Yod is the teeniest, tiniest, smallest letter, and he's this enormous God, and he uses that teeny tiny letter to begin his names. Yahweh, his son Yeshua, his city Yerushalayim, they all begin with the yud. So just keep that in mind. It's kind of clever that he's done that. We have 3 more letters we'd like to learn, and they are in the second half of the alphabet. And I don't know if you noticed the beginning, when the headline was the Hebrew Aleph Beit. Alphabet comes from Aleph Beit, the first 2 letters. It had a little notation. It said with final forms. I just want to point out that there are 5 Hebrew letters. We'll get to one or 2 maybe a little bit later, but there are 5 Hebrew letters that have a different shape if the letter appears as the last letter of a word. So just keep that in mind. You can see them on the chart here. There's the Kaf, the Mem, the Nun, the Pei, and the Tzadi. And those are the 5. But the new letters I want to show you, so we can actually start digging into the Bible. We've already covered, these are the last 3 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph Beit. It's the Resh, the Shin, and the Tav. We've already talked about the Resh. It's the head, it's the R sound with a value of 200. The next one is the Shin, or Sheen. It makes the SH sound. It's 300 gematria. Its picture is 2 teeth. And teeth destroy. So anytime you see a sheen in a word, you're going to think destruction, okay? And I think the sheen is a very pretty letter, especially in the middle font there. It looks Hebrew, okay? And it's the S. Sometimes it makes the S sound too instead of the SH. So depending on the word. And the very last letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the Tav, okay? And the Tav represents a covenant, okay? It's the letter T. In the old days, if 2 people made a covenant, one would put his mark, the other would put his mark. You had cross marks, you've made a deal. If you turn it, it becomes a T. That's where we get the letter T, Tav. Okay, and it represents a covenant. And the ultimate covenant, of course, is the one that God made on the cross when he leaves his throne and comes down and dies for us. There's the ultimate covenant. T, cross, Tav. These should become familiar. I've kind of color-coded them, how my mind sees them. And maybe we'll just help you get familiar with them. Now let's go to the very first word of the Bible. And Genesis 1:1, it starts out, I'll just read the verse in Hebrew. It's Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim va'et haaretz. The first word, let's just focus on that here. I have it in the colors of all that we've just learned. It's Bereshit. Bereshit means in beginning. When a word begins with a bait, the bait represents the word in. And so Bereshit is actually saying ba, Reshit. Ba is in, Reshit is first fruits, beginning. It's the head, the first, the top. Okay? So in the beginning, that's not the, in beginning, in first fruits. That's the first word of the Bible, what it's referring to. If you look at the 6 letters that it makes up, you have a bait. Well, that's interesting. That's interesting here. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but he begins the Bible with a bait. He's Aleph, he's God Almighty, but he begins the Bible with the second letter, a bait. And he begins it with an enlarged bait. You will see that the bait is a little bit bigger than all the others. There are a handful, more than a handful, a couple dozen, either enlarged or smaller letters throughout the Bible in the original language. Why they're that way, most of them have reasons, and you can figure them out as you study it. But it's interesting that God would have told Moses, okay, make that B bigger, make that Vav smaller, and they did, and they've carried that on all this time. Okay, so the first letter is bait, the second letter is resh, which is the head. So the first 2 letters, bait, resh, spell bar, which we know means sun, right? And the third letter is an aleph. Beit, resh, aleph, sun, aleph. That was God's letter. So the first 3 letters spell Son of God. Coincidence? No, I don't think so. By the way, there's no biblical Hebrew word for coincidence. So everything that you're seeing here tonight is going to be not a coincidence, it's a fingerprint. And you will know the difference, because there is a difference between a coincidence and a fingerprint. You're going to see some of this stuff. No, God did this on purpose. By the way, the letter bait, just by itself, is the abbreviation for son in Hebrew. Whether you use ben or bar, bait is the abbreviation for son. So everything's kind of pointing to bait, son. Notice, what is a bait? The bait was the house. It's the beginning. It's when this is the house that God wants to come and live in. And Yeshua is that house. He is the bait that God wanted to come and live in. Okay? So the first 3 letters, beit, resh, aleph, Son of God. Then we have a shin, and that is destruction. Followed by a yud, hand. Followed by a tav, cross. The first word of the Bible. Am I seeing this? Are you seeing this? It says the Son of God destroyed with his hand on the cross. That's pretty amazing, I think. You know, it's just right in your face. There's a verse in Isaiah, chapter 46, 9 and 10. You hear it quoted all the time. I am God, there is no other. I am God, there is none like me. Declaring the end from the beginning. People always say, you know, do you take the Bible literally? A lot of times I do. You know, Yeah, they always bring up, yeah, it says God has feathers. Yeah, you know what, I take the Bible? I take the Bible seriously. And there are times when you know to take it literally. And here's one of them. It says, he declares the end from the beginning. The first word of the Bible is in beginning, and it is in the beginning. And he declares that the Son of God is destroyed with his hand on the cross. He's declaring the end from the beginning. That's what I'm saying. Another thing that you'll see in Bereshit is a picture of the Abrahamic covenant. I don't know if you remember, this is Genesis 15. In fact, Genesis 15:6. This is where God had promised Abraham. He said, your descendants, Abraham's an old man. Abraham, your descendants are going to be so numerous you won't be able to count them. They're going to be like, I don't know if it was the stars in the sky. Okay? So there's this promise that he made, and it said, and he, Abraham believed God, and God credited it to him, counted it as righteousness. So Abraham is declared righteous by what means? He believed God. That's it. That is that verse right there. That's it. That's how you get to heaven. You have to be righteous to get to heaven. And how do you be righteous? You believe God. It's all faith. It has nothing to do with what you do, works, or anything like that. Anyway, so it says Abraham believed God, and now God is going to seal the covenant. And the way you do a covenant is you would take an animal, you would cut the animal in half, and then the two parties would walk between the two halves of this cut animal. And if either party breaks their word, may that party end up like this animal, cut in half. Okay, that was how a deal was made. So what God does is he makes this promise to Abraham, and then it says he took an ox, a sheep, and what else? There was a third. I forget what it is. He takes 3 animals and 2 birds. He cuts the animals in half and puts the 2 birds. So God himself then, as a flaming torch or a burning oven, he walked between these animals. He put Abraham to sleep. Abram, he hadn't changed his name yet. He put Abram to sleep. Abram was not in on this covenant in terms of if Abram breaks his part of the deal, he didn't have any part of the deal. God is making his promise to Abram, and God is walking as a flaming torch, okay? And the word for flame or fire in Hebrew is Aish. You can see it's an aleph, it's the blue aleph and the black sheen. By the way, that's the word for fire. What's Aish? Aleph is strong. What's sheen or shin? It's destruction. What is aleph sheen? The ultimate strength, strong destruction. Fire. Fire destroys everything. So you can even see, define the word Aish, and I'm sure that's where we get the word ash from, comes from Aish. Remember, God was first on everything. And the word covenant is brit, okay? A lot of times you'll hear, you've heard of a bris. A bris is where they do the circumcision, okay? For some reason, there are Jews who, they take the T sound on the end and put an S sound. I'm wondering if that's why bris is actually from brit, okay? A brit is a bris, could be. But anyway, the word brit is covenant, okay? So in that verse in the Abrahamic covenant, in Genesis 15, if you're following along, it says, when the sun had set and it was very dark, behold, there appeared this smoking oven and a flaming torch, okay, which then it passed between these pieces of the animals. And it says, on that day, Yahweh, the Lord, Yahweh, Yud-He, Vav-He, God, that's his name, he made a brit, he made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants I've given this land. Okay, the word brit is a bait, a resh, a yud, and a tav. Got it? So that's the word brit. Aish is fire. You can see that if you put Aish right down in the middle of Beit Resh Yud Tav, it becomes Bereshit. The word Bereshit is showing a picture of the flaming torch in the Brit, in the covenant. Make sense? Okay, let's move on to the next word, because we've got a whole Bible, a whole book to do. The second word of the Bible is bara. It's a Beit, a Resh, and an Aleph. Beit, Resh, Aleph. Where have we heard that before? If you notice, the word bara are the first three letters of Bereshit. You see it? Beit Resh, we already know, is son. Aleph is God. So bara actually spells, or sounds out, son of God. It's letting you know who the creator is. If you missed it in word 1, here he's repeating it in word 2. Bara, son of God, creator. And this word for bara, it's not a word that anybody can use except God. He uses it 3 times in Genesis chapter 1, and he uses it very sparingly throughout the rest of the Bible. It's something that only God can do. You don't ever see man baraing anything. Only God bara. And it also it implies creating out of nothing. Okay, ex nihilo. It also is referred to in is in Exodus. It gives an example where it could mean fattened or filled. So we don't really know what the verb exactly means, because God's the only one who does it, and he does it so sparingly. So in the beginning, or in beginning, God fattened, he filled, he created, he ex nihiloed, something he did at the beginning. Okay, so that's bara. And who is this guy? Who is this God? Who, the Son of God? None other than Jesus H. Christ. Have you ever heard people call him Jesus H. Christ? I always wondered, what is that? What's the H stand for? That never make sense. But you know, if you turn it to Hebrew, it would be Jesus as Yeshua H. Christ. And Christ is a Greek word. A Greek word that it's a Greek word of a Hebrew word. The Hebrew word, we call it Messiah. In Hebrew, it's Mashiach. So it's Yeshua H. Mashiach. Now, the H, they have a sound in Hebrew that is the H, and that's going to be our next letter. It's the letter Hey. Now, be careful with the Hey. Hey has the little slot open up at the top. You'll see other Hebrew letters that look very similar. Some of them do look very similar. And like the Tav even could almost look like this one. The Tav has the little tail down at the bottom. Okay, so the letter Hey is it's the letter H. It's the sound H. It's the 5th letter. It's gematria is 5, and the letter Hey. This one's special. If you ask a Jewish person or Hebrew speaker, what's a beit? Boom, house. They just rattle it off. What's yod? Hand. Yod, hand. They just all shin, tooth. It just is. If you ask him what Hey is, Hey, it's his breath. No, his essence. It's this was one that you just can't define. Okay, it's something. It's behold, a revelation. The modern Hebrew letter is a picture of a house with an open window at the top. Okay, expecting blessings to come pouring in, and the Paleo Hebrew is a man with his hands up in the air, praising. Behold, hey, hey, hey. That's what a hey is. All right. You'll see hey. Oh, and by the way, hey, if it's behold, that means something is coming after it. And it's used as the word the. That's what the word the does. If I said, today I ate the what? Cupcake. Okay, it's behold, it's the next word is the big one. Okay, So Hey in Hebrew represents the. You see it in the last two, the two things in Genesis that he creates, the Ha-Shamayim and the Ha-Aretz. When you say Ha-Shamayim, the Ha is the, Shamayim is sky waters, which is heavens. When you say Ha-Aretz, the Hey, Ha, at the first, that's the black Hey, that's the. Aretz is actually land or earth. Got it? Good. So when you say Jesus H. Christ, it's Yeshua the Messiah, or in Hebrew, Yeshua HaMashiach. Jesus the Messiah. A new letter, because we're trying to get to the third word, and the new letter we need is a Lamed. Okay? A Lamed is the 12th letter, I believe, in the Hebrew alphabet, and it's got a value of 30. It's you can see the ancient, you can see where we get the letter L from. It's not a stretch. And it represents a shepherd's crook, and if you are holding the shepherd's crook, you have the authority. Okay, you'll see a king's holding a scepter. That's the Lamed. Got it? And he's wearing a crown. A crown, that's the horns on the Aleph. Okay? Make sense? There's your Lamed, and the next letter is the Mem. Now Mem is one of these letters that has the final form. You can see there's two of them. We're reading, remember, right to left. The one in the parentheses would be the final form Mem. Okay? And so if it begins the word, or if it's somewhere in the word, you use the first mem. If it's the last letter of the word, you use the one in the parentheses. Mem is the zigzagged lines. You can very easily see where we get a letter M from. Mem represents water, and water represents chaos. It's always moving. Okay, so Mem, got it? Now we can go to the third word. It's the way the Bible's read so far. Bereshit bara Elohim. The third word of the Bible is Elohim. This is God's title. Okay? It's we've covered all 5 of these letters so far. It's an Aleph. Let's look at just the first 2. Aleph, Lamed. Aleph is strength. Lamed is shepherd's crook. Who's the strong shepherd? El. You'll oftentimes hear him referred to as El. It's short for Elohim. And El is the strong shepherd. God. The third letter was the Hey, which is behold, something's going to be revealed. The fourth letter is a Yod, which is hand. And the Mem is water or chaos. So you can define or define out his title as the strong shepherd who reveals his hand on the waters. In other words, he controls the seas. Elohim is not his name. It is his title, and it's his power title. Got it? Because he's creating heavens and earth with this title. His name, we find out later, Yahweh. Okay, he doesn't go by that. At the first in Genesis, he only goes by the title Elohim. Once man is created, he goes by Yahweh Elohim. It's in your book. Read it. What you'll say in English is he's God, but then once that's Elohim, and then once man is created, he goes by the Lord God. They substitute Lord for Yahweh. If you break Elohim down in 3 parts, you have the first 2, Aleph Lamed, which is El, which is God's title, the strong shepherd. And then you have the Hey, and what did Hey represent? Hey represents the. And then the last 2 letters, Yud Mem, is the word Yam, which is the word for seas. Remember I told you Mem had water, chaos. The seas are always churning, and so Elohim could be God of the seas also, which is again pointing to his power. You'll notice that God, Elohim, he chose to put his name third. Now, why did he do that? You would think maybe, you start the Bible with Elohim. Great, no. Remember, he started with Beit, the letter Beit. So he puts his title third. Well, there is a Trinity aspect that he's going to weave through this story, and you need to be looking for it, because he is a Trinity, and that's what we're discussing today. But there is this triune nature which you're going to see, and to show you an example of where he puts these threes in here, look at the if you have a perfect triangle. Okay, and you want to make a perfect triangle with dots. You would have to have a certain number of dots to make a perfect triangle, and these are called perfect triangle numbers. For example, 3 is a perfect triangle number. You can make a perfect triangle with 3 dots. If you want to make a bigger perfect triangle, the next size bigger, you would need 6 dots, because you would take the 3 and you'd put 3 across the bottom and make 6. If you're a bowler, then you'll know the next perfect triangle going up is a 10, right? You add 4 to the bottom row. You always add the next number to the bottom row. So if we added 4 to that row, we're going to add 5 to the next row. It gets 15. The next is 21, 28, 36, 45, 55. These are all perfect triangle numbers. That's how many dots you need to make a perfect triangle. Well, if you take the word Elohim, and remember we talked about the gematria values, and we've mentioned them, but let's go ahead and put them in. Aleph is 1, Lamed was 30, He is 5, Yud is 10, and Mem is 40. If you take the first 3 letters of Elohim's name, Aleph, Lamed, He, that's 1, 30, and 5, it adds up to 36, which happens to be a perfect triangle number. If you take the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th letters of his name, Lamed, He, Yud, that's 30, 5, and 10, that's 45, that's a perfect triangle number. And finally, take the last 3 letters, He, Yud, Mem. He is 5, Yud 10, and 40, that's 55. That's a perfect triangle number. Not a coincidence. Again, there's no Hebrew word for coincidence, biblical Hebrew word. So he's got this 3 thing showing up here in his title, okay? And also, he likes to do all kind of clever things that you'll discover. If you take this very famous verse, Psalm 23, remember the Lord, Aleph is the Lord, that's God, is my Lamed. Lamed is shepherd's crook, shepherd. I shall not, hey, behold, revelation, blessings are coming. You do not, I shall not want. He, Yod, hand, he leads me beside still Mem, waters. He kind of hides his title in Psalm 23. There's something I need to explain about Elohim. Notice it ends in a Yud Mem, which the sound makes the sound Im, I am. In Hebrew, if it's a masculine word, masculine words end in I am or Yud Mem. You've probably heard them, some of them yourself. A cherub. A cherub is an angel, right? Whenever God kicked Adam and Eve out of the garden, he said he posted cherubim with flaming swords to guard the way to the tree of knowledge, of good, tree of life. So cherubim, it ends in I am. It's a masculine plural Okay, you also hear with the seraph a seraph is one of the angels that are around the throne singing holy, holy, holy. Notice they sing holy, holy, holy. There's the three again, as Isaiah talks about them singing holy, holy, holy. And in Revelation it talks about it as well. So a seraph is one of those angels. The seraphim would be plural of these angels. Okay, you also maybe heard the word goy. A goy is a Gentile. The goyim are the Gentiles. And here we see God chooses for his title not Eloha, which happens to be, I think, the word for Pharaoh in Hebrew, but Elohim. He chooses a title that's plural. Again, a hint to his triune nature. We're going to see lots of these hints popping up. And a couple words that you'll discover that end in the Yud Mem, plural, that aren't necessarily you would think of as plural. The word water, mayim, water. Remember, we have to get in God's way of thinking. You know, I wonder why the Jews are so successful, because they have Hebrew and it's God's perfect language, and you have that. That's a big head start. So we want to be thinking in God's language. If water is mayim, water is plural in his thinking. The word heavens, hashamayim. Remember, the ha is the, shamayim is actually sky waters. Shamayim, you hear the word mayim in there, sky waters. Okay? And by the way, how many translations in English, Genesis starts out, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. If your version says heaven, you're way off. It's definitely heavens, hashamayim. Keep that in mind. Another word is panayim, which is face, and which is actually kind of faces. We never just have one face. You have, at any one time, it's always moving, changing. You have faces. Okay? And another one that's really cool is chaim. Chaim is the word for life, but it's plural. Whenever God breathes into Adam's nostrils, he doesn't breathe chai. He doesn't breathe one life in there. He breathes chaim, lives, into Adam's nostrils. You never see, God does not breathe anything into Eve's nostrils. When he takes Eve out of Adam, she already has life because he breathed multiple chaim, lives, into Adam. Chaim. Chaim, to life. Okay. Now, sticking with this triune nature of God, we have him a plural title, Elohim. We have his name showing up third. We had all those threes, triangle and perfect triangle numbers in his name. We also see his triune nature in this example. Whenever scientists say that the earth and everything was created, you had to have these three things come into existence. You had to have time. You have to have space. And you have to have matter. Stuff. And those three things, scientists have even shown or concluded that, for example, matter and space had to come into existence at the same time, because otherwise, where would you put it? You got to have a space to put the matter in. And you've heard of the time-space continuum, right? Time and space are so interwovenly together, they're kind of like one. Or matter, and time and space, I'm getting ahead of myself. But yeah, time and space, those two are the time-space continuum. They're to be so together. The time and space had to come into existence at the same time. time also had to come, because otherwise, when would you put this? Okay, when would you put the matter? So time, space, and matter had to all come into existence at the same time. And in Genesis 1:1, there's no problem there. You have Bereshit, in beginning, there's time. Bara Elohim, created God. At Hashemayim, Hashemayim is space. And Va'et Haaretz, Haaretz is the land, the matter. Okay, so you've got all three of these coming into existence in verse 1. And there's three of them, time, space, and matter. Again, the triune nature showing up. And not only do you have this triune plural God, titled God showing up in the third word, and he creates a trinity of things, time, space, and matter. Each of those are also a trinity. Matter is solid, liquid, and gas. Space is length, width, and depth. Time is past, present, and future. You can see the threes. It's an important thing with him. Okay. Now, even if you have time, space, and matter, and they're just sitting there, okay, I got some matter and it's sitting here in this space and it's at this time, it's a pretty boring universe unless stuff starts doing something. Something has to spin, move, something, okay? So scientists say you actually need two other things. You need an action. Something has to happen. And you need something to cause it to happen. You need a force. Well, God provides all of that in Genesis 1:1 as well, because you have Bereshit, which is time. You have Bara, created, fattened, filled. There's your action. And you have Elohim. Elohim, that's the power. That's God of the seas. There's your force. He got it moving. Then you have this fourth word, which is et, which, notice, it's not in your King James. It's not in any version. It's only in the Hebrew. And King James, or whoever did the translating, decided we'll just leave it out. So it's a word that shows up thousands of times throughout the Hebrew Bible, and they just kept leaving it out. And you're going to see that was a huge mistake. Then we have the space, which is Hashemayim, and we have the matter, which is Haaretz. So you've got the five elements that you need: time, space, matter, force, and action, all in the 7 words of Genesis 1:1. And you only have 2 words left over. You have an et and you have a va'et. So this et, whatever it is, it actually shows up twice in Genesis 1:1. It must be important. Okay? So let's see, we got time, space, maybe we got that one taken care of. Oh, sorry. Okay, what goes next? We're going to, this et, notice, let's talk about it. It's the 4th word. The et, it sits in the middle of the verse. It's 2 letters. It's an aleph and a tav. Notice, aleph, we already know, is strong, strength. It's God's letter is aleph. And tav, we said, was the covenant or a cross. So the letters for aleph tav is God on the cross. Wow. I don't know how that's going to apply here, but that's a pretty bold word if that's what God on the cross. Notice where aleph sits in the sentence. It sits at the right hand of Elohim. Well, there's another big clue, because throughout the Brit Hadashah, throughout the New Testament and the Old Testament, it talks about the Messiah. The Old Testament talks about the Messiah, how he sits at the right hand of God. And Jesus, after he's crucified, he goes and he sits at the right hand of God. And here you have a little word, aleph tav, and it's sitting at the right hand of God. and its pictures represent God on the cross. Now, let me tell you what the word, this et, actually means in Hebrew. If you ask a Jewish speaker, what is et? They'll tell you, it's untranslatable. There's no definition for it. You say, okay, well, let's take it out of the sentence. No, you can't take it out of the sentence. If you take it out of the sentence, it doesn't make any sense. So you can go round and round. Take it out. I can't take it out. Well, what does it mean? It doesn't have a meaning. Well, then take it out. No, drive you crazy. So here's what it actually does in Hebrew. The et, okay, this is the English part of the lesson. An et points to the direct object of the verb. So anytime you have a verb in Hebrew here, and you need to point to the direct object of that verb, here the verb is bara, created, or fattened, or filled, whatever it is. So what was created? The only way in Hebrew you know is you look at what is the word that follows et. And et is pointing back to that verb. Whatever follows et is the direct object of that verb. So here in this verse, Bereshit bara, bara is your verb, Elohim, he's the one doing the creating. What did he create? Et hashamayim, whatever followed et, so hashamayim, the shamayim, heavens. And then va'et haaretz, there's another et. The vav, we'll learn soon, means and there's another et, so that means something else got created. Whatever followed that is going to be the direct object, another direct object of the verb. So it's haaretz, the aretz, land. Got it? That's the technical reason, the technical thing for et. Okay, but it's just also a coincidence that it sits at the right hand of God, and it's God on the cross. Right? There is another thing about et. Aleph is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Tav is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So Aleph Tav is the first and the last. Revelation 3 times, Jesus calls himself the Alpha and Omega. The New Testament Revelation is in Greek. Alpha is Aleph. Omega is the last letter. Alpha is the first. Alpha is the first. Omega is the last in Greek. And they correspond with Alpha is Aleph. Omega is Tav. If you're saying I'm the Alpha and Omega, that's what you'd say in Greek. If you're saying it in English, you'd say I am the A and the Z. If you're saying in Hebrew, it's I am the Aleph and the Tav. If you're talking about if you're mentioning the first and the last letter of an alphabet, you're talking about you are the alpha, you are the whole, you are the whole word. The whole word of God is made up of this 22-letter alphabet, and you are it. And in the New Testament, we have Yeshua saying he claims to be the Word of God, right? And he is the Word of God, the incarnate Word of God. Okay? And you see that the whole verse has a heptadic structure. Heptadic meaning based on 7, okay? And this Aleph Tav sits right in the middle. It's the servant candle, the shamash candle they call it, and that's right in the middle. He's the light, the center light, the Aleph Tav, sitting at the right hand of God, God on the cross, the first and the last, the Alpha and Omega. There's your et. Very nice. Okay. Okay, next word. After et, you get Hashamayim. Remember, that's the, Shamayim is literally sky waters. You hear the word Mayim, waters. But we can translate it as the heavens. Inside that word, Hashamayim, notice it ends in Yud Mem. Yud is hand, Mem is water. But the other 3 letters, the first 3 letters, It's a He, Shin, Mem. If you look at those 3 letters backwards, it spells Mem, Shin, He, which is Moshe, which is the word for Moses, Moshe. And because it's spelled backwards in the word, it's actually a picture of, remember Moses? This is in chapter 2 of Exodus. Pharaoh's daughter is down by the river. They had to throw all the babies into the river, right? And so Moses' mother puts him in a basket and floats him in the river, in the Nile. And Pharaoh's daughter finds him and takes him out. And she names him Moshe. And she said, why? Because I drew him out of the water. In the word Hashemayim, you see a picture of Moshe and a hand drawing Moshe up out of the water, which is cool. In Bereshit, he had a hidden picture of the Abrahamic covenant, the fire in the covenant, the Brit. And here you have a picture of Moses being pulled out of the river by Pharaoh's daughter. Okay, our next letter is a Vav. The Vav is the 6th letter. Sometimes it makes the V sound. It can double as an O sound or a W. Sometimes it's a U. You know, there are no vowels in Hebrew. They're all consonants. But some act like vowels at times. And this one, the Vav, look, it's the V-O-W-U, it's the vowel. It's almost a vowel, just by the letters that it can represent. Its picture is a nail or a hook. Okay, it's ancient picture. And the word Vav actually means nail in Hebrew. Hey Joe, throw me a Vav. Look out, a nail's coming. If you want more than one, throw me some Vavim. It ends in I-M. Nails are coming at you. You got it? Nail. Vav. It looks like a nail. Right? I mean, it's whatever form it is. And what do nails do? Nails connect things. And in Hebrew, a Vav is used for the word and. You'll hear it in, for dinner I ate pizza, salad, Coca-Cola, cobbler. They and this, va. Anytime you hear va in front of a word, it's usually referring to and it connects things together as nails do. Vav also is an upright man. You can see it's the 6th letter. Man was created on day 6. Notice the Vav, by the way, shows up in the 6th word of the Bible. 6, Vav. They are so interconnected. And man, as I told you, man is also was created on the 6th day. So 6 is the number for man. Now that we have the Vav, we can now actually spell out and talk about God's name. I understand this is not in Genesis 1:1, but it's the letters of it are, and it's kind of important to just take a look at what his name is. This is when Moses is up on Mount Sinai, and God says, take your shoes off, you're on holy ground, and I've heard your plight and your pleas, and I'm going to rescue your people. And Moses says, why me? Because he stuttered. And God said, don't worry, I'm going with you. And then Moses says, what is your name? He says, they're going to ask me, what is your name? And God answers, you tell them Yahweh. Yahweh. Yahweh of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Okay, this is the name of God, not his title. Some people pronounce it Yahweh, Yahweh, Jehovah. When it went to the Latin, they started inserting J's, Jehovah. Okay, that's how we get Jerusalem, because they turned the Yerushalayim, they turned the Yud to a J. Yeshua became Jesus, the J again. Let's stick with the Yud, shall we? So his title is Elohim. His name is Yahweh. If you look at the pictures, a Yud is a hand. A Hey is something is going to be revealed. A Vav is a nail. And another Hey is another revelation. So Yahweh actually is the hand reveals, the nail reveals. Who's that? Okay, this is Yahweh God, Yahweh Elohim, Yeshua, the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. They're God. There's three. They're one. I told you that Vav was the sixth letter of the Bible, and it showed up in the sixth word, and it represents man. And just as a little side note here, there are 6 words for man in the Bible: Adam, Ish, Enosh, Gever in the Old Testament, and in the New Testament, Aner and Anthropos. So he's very consistent with his 6 and man. You also see in Revelation at the end, Antichrist is going to be a man, and a very bad man, and his number will be 666. Okay, number of man. If you look at the end here of Genesis, the last 4 words of Genesis 1:1, it's Et Hashemayim Va'et Haaretz. It's in the beginning God created the heavens, and the Vav is the and then there's another Et, the land. Okay, and let's take finally the last word is Haaretz. The Ha is the Aretz is land. It's the word land alone is just Aretz. Okay, if you take that the letters for Aretz, A-R-E-T-S, and turn them around, you get T-E-R-R-A, Terra, Latin. You know, people think, oh, he speaks Latin. No, Latin just turned a bunch of the words around, the Hebrew words that God had created first, and claimed them for their own. God is first on everything. In English, it's earth, E-A-R-T. It's the same letters, okay? In fact, the H at the end of earth was probably the H from the Haaretz, at the beginning of they moved it to the end. And now that we have earth, you know, if you happen to be one of these, you know, tree-hugging Gaia, the earth is Mother God or something, you know, and there are the elements, earth, water, sky, and fire, or whatever. You know what? God answered that one too, because in Genesis 1:1, he did put fire in the word Bereshit. It's right there in the middle. And he put in the word sky in the word Shemayim. He put in the word water, which is Mayim. And he put in the word Aretz, which is earth. So you have your 4 elements that also show up there in Genesis 1:1. Now, in biblical Hebrew, there is no word for universe. So whenever he says Hashemayim Va'et Haaretz, the heavens and the earth, that phrase represents the totality of everything. It's the universe. God made it all. Okay? And it's important to realize that those 2 things that he made, the heavens and the earth, they're just not 2 random things. There's a dual nature to them that we have to be aware of, or you should be aware of. It's the heavens, that's the upper, that's the spiritual, and you have the earth, that's the physical. So there are these 2 worlds. It shows up when Jesus talks to Nicodemus in chapter 3, and he says, you must be born again. by the Spirit, and you were physically born in your mother's womb, and he went, how do I go? No, you remember that chapter 3 of the book of John. But he's talking about these two worlds that are going, okay, there's the physical world and there's a spiritual. You're physically born and there's a spiritual birth. That's being reborn or born again or saved, or it's believe God and God credits it to you as righteousness. Profess Jesus as Lord, and God raised him from the dead. You believe that and you will be saved. Okay, it's just belief. Anyway, but let's look at this dual nature of the spiritual and the physical. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to Genesis 1:26, just because this verse, it exemplifies it probably the best. And then God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness." Notice, it says God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness." He's speaking in plural pronouns. Again, another hint to his triune nature. Okay? And no, he's not talking to angels here. He's a Trinity. He's a 3-in-1 God talking. But here's the point I want to make. It says, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness." What is the difference between image and likeness? It sounds like he's repeating himself. There's got to be a difference between image and likeness, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. And if you go to the Hebrew, look what it says. Then God said, "Let us make man Betsilmenu, in our image, according Kidmatenu, to our likeness." But these two words, Betsilmenu and Kidmatenu, they break down into certain root words that have specific meanings. For example, Betsilmenu, the root word is sal. Sal is shadow, phantom. It's pointing to the spiritual realm, and it represents the heavens, and that's the spiritual side. Versus Kidmatenu, the root word is dam. Dam is the Hebrew word for blood. It's the physical. It's the earth. Okay, the flesh and blood and the stuff. So when he says, "Let us make man in our image," to our spiritual side and in our physical side. That's how he made us. And there's the duality, the heavens and the earth, spiritual and physical. Make sense? And by the way, remember his name, Yahweh, the Yud He Vav He? If you write his name vertically, look, we are in his image. The word Yahweh, written vertically, is the Yud is the head, and you have the He is 2 arms, and then you have a Vav as the body, and then you have another He, which is 2 legs. We are kind of written, we are formed in the shape of his name. And you can also look at it as 2 of his letters, the Yud and the Vav. The Yud is hand, and the Vav is nail. You can't get anything more physical than driving an iron nail through a flesh hand. There's the physical side. And the other 2 letters are He and He, and that's the one that they have trouble defining. It's the spiritual. It's the one you just can't put your finger on. Okay, so those 2 do show up in his name as well. Now I mentioned there's this heptadic structure to Genesis 1:1. You see that there are 7 words. Now remember, he likes the 3s. We got 3s, all through here. But now he's also going to weave 7s all through. Okay, we start out with 7 words. Okay, and by the way, each of those 7 words represents a period of time. For example, there's a verse in Psalms 90. "For 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday when it passes by," or like a watch in the night. Okay, so and in the New Testament it says a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day to God. So, we know God made the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested. So there's your 7-day week. This seven represents perfection, completion. You'll see sevens all through the Bible and all through just creation. And these sevens are just, why are they there? There's 7 days in the week. Why? There just are. There's 7 colors in the rainbow. There's 7 notes on the music scale. There's 7 holes in your head. These are not coincidences. These are fingerprints that he's left showing his completion, his perfection. Okay? And so he also does this in Genesis 1, verse 1. He puts 7 words. And if each word represents a 1,000-year period, let's see how they correspond. The first word, Bereshit, in beginning. That's the first 1,000 years. The second word, bara, if it's fattened or filled, what happened in the second 1,000 years? He flooded the earth. We're down to 8 people. Noah, his wife, 3 sons, and their wives. He's got to fatten and fill the earth. He's got a bara in the second 1,000 years. In the third 1,000 years, Elohim shows up and makes a covenant with Moses and chooses a people. And in the 4,000 years, at the end of the 4,000 years, who shows up but Aleph Tav, God on the cross, Yeshua, Jesus. He shows up then. In the 5,000 years, which is the 5th word, Hashemayim. Where is Jesus in the 5,000 years? He's gone back up to heaven. And that's where he is now. And then in the 6,000 years, you have the word Va'et. Va and et. Aleph Tav again. God on the cross again. Jesus again. And he's coming back in the 6,000 years. It should be any day now. And then the last word is Haaretz. Haaretz, the earth. And what's final is peace on earth, goodwill toward men. The Jews are looking for the Messiah to bring them 1,000 years of peace. The Christians are looking for the 1,000-year reign of Christ. It's the 7,000 years. It's the peace on earth, goodwill toward men. Okay? So, in Genesis 1:1, we're talking about these sevens. You definitely see that there are 7 words. And if you count them up, there are 28 letters. 28 letters, 7 times 4. Not a coincidence. If you look at this middle word, et, which sits at the right hand of God, and remember, they're a trinity. So Elohim, there's 5 letters. Et is 2 letters. Those 2 together make up 7 letters. If you look at the Et Hashemayim, which is the heavens, the 2 things he created, Et Hashemayim, Va'et Haaretz, each contain 7 letters. If you take the first 3 words of Genesis 1:1, Bereshit, bara, Elohim, that's 14 letters, which is divisible by 7. If you take the last 4 words of Genesis 1:1, Et Hashemayim, Va'et Haaretz, 14 letters. If you take the nouns would be God, Elohim, sky, waters, heavens, Hashemayim, and Haaretz. Adds up to 14 letters. If you take the gematria values, remember those little gematria values? Let's stick them in here. Elohim adds up to 86. Hashemayim is 395. Haaretz is 296. It adds up to 777, which is 7 times 111, which again is pointing to his Trinity, big time. If you take the gematria of the first letter of the first word and the first letter of the last word, that's Bereshit is a bait, Haaretz is a hay, 5, 2 and 5 is 7. Take the last letter of the first word, take the last letter of the last word, that's Tav and Sadi, 490, which is 7 times 70. If you take the first and last letters of all 7 words, it adds up to 1,393. which is 7 times 199. We could go on and on and on of all the sevens. In God's name alone, remember I just got done telling you, the gematria of Elohim is 86 for his title. Not his name, his title. 8 and 6, if you take the digits of 86, 8 and 6 are 14, divisible by 7. If you take all the digits of the gematria values, 4 and 0 is 40, so 40 is 4 and 0, 10 is 1 and 0, 5, 3 and 0 for 30 and 1, it adds up to 14, all the digits of his title. So my point is, he likes sevens. We could go on all night with just pointing out all the sevens he has hidden in there, but we shan't. But you got the point. He's this Trinity, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, but he's also this 7, perfection, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. They're all over the place. If we take the entire verse, Genesis 1:1, and we put in the gematria values, you see Bereshit adds up to 913, Bara is 203, Elohim 86, Et is 401, Hashemayim 395, Va'et 407, and Haaretz 296. The total, the sum of all the letters in Genesis 1:1, the sum of all 28 letters, is 2,701. And you would just probably imagine that 2,701 would also be divisible by 7. It's not. It must be divisible by 3, because he loves 7s, he loves 3. If it's not divisible by 7, it must be divisible by 3. Guess what? It's not. Now that's weird. Why would 2701, how could it not be divisible by 7 or 3? Everything is. But this one's not. Because not only does he love 7s and 3s, he likes something besides that. He likes 37s, believe it or not. There's a verse in Jeremiah, chapter 10, verse 12. It said, it is he, we're talking about God, it is he who made the earth by his power, who established the world by his wisdom, and by his understanding he stretched out the heavens. The word for wisdom in Hebrew is chakma. There's some letters here we haven't seen, but I have them on the screen here. And I wanted to show you the ordinate values versus the gematria values of this word chakma. Because it says he established the world by his chakma. Let's see what chakma is in the Hebrew. Chakma is made up of 4 letters, a chet. The chet is the 8th letter. When I say ordinate values, it's just, where does it show up in the alphabet? Chet is the 8th letter. The next letter is a kaf. The kaf is the 11th letter in the Hebrew alphabet. Mem is 13, and He is 5. If you just look at the place values, the ordinate values of chakma, it turns out to add up to 37. If you plug in the gematria values for chakma, well now, Het is still 8. It's the 8th letter, and its gematria is 8. Kaf now, though, its gematria becomes 20. And its Mem, its gematria is 40. And then the He is 5. Gematria is the same as its ordinate value. So the gematria value of chakma adds up to 73. So you have if you add it one way, it's 37. If you add it the other way, you get 73. If you multiply them together, remember, it's by his wisdom he established the world. If you multiply 37 times 73, you get 2701, which is that total of Genesis 1:1. These gematria values, by the way, the Jews actually used letters for numbers. The gematria is 1 through 10. If you want 5 of something, you say, give me He. He is 5. If you want 2, give me Beit. Beit is 2. Then, after it gets down to 1 through 10, then they jump 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, up to 100, 200, 300, 400. So if you want 325, 300 is Shin, 20 is Kaf, 5 is He, Shin Kaf He, 325. Got it? That's how the gematria values, they actually use them for numbers. Another interesting thing here with this, we like his 3s and his 7s, is you all seen a Star of David. And just like we were doing with those triangle numbers, where it takes a certain number of dots to make a perfect triangle, to be a perfect triangle number, like 3, 6, 10, 15. The same applies for Stars of David. The smallest Star of David that you can make, you have to have 13 dots. It's your 3 and 1, 1 and 3, 1, 3, 13. Okay, you'll see a Star of David with 13 dots on the back of a US dollar bill. Find it, it's there. So 13 is the minimum number. You can't make a Star of David with 12, you can't make it with 14, you gotta have 13. If you want to make a bigger Star of David, you're going to need more dots. And there's a specific number, and it's going to be 37 dots. 37 makes a perfect Star of David. The next number bigger than that is 73 dots. This is not a coincidence, folks. The one beyond that, I think, is 121. There are some other numbers in there. One that's further down, you need 337. 337 dots will make a nice big Star of David. There's your 337s. How does he do this? You know? How do you not believe the Bible when it's just loaded with these kind of things? Let's look at the first verse again. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim va'et haaretz. And let's take the even words. The even words are bara, 203, et, 401, and va'et, 407. Just the even words add up to 1011, which is 3 times, coincidentally, 3 times, not coincidentally, 3 times 337. 337, we know, is a perfect Star of David number. So with just the gematria of the even words, we have enough dots to make 3 Stars of David, each of 337 dots. If we take the odd words of Genesis 1:1, that would be Bereshit, which is 913, Elohim, which is 86, Hashemayim, 395, and Haaretz, the earth, is 296. Add the odd words together, it comes out to 1,690, which is 10 times 169. 169 dots, that will make a perfect hexagram, perfectly symmetrical. And if 169 makes one perfect hexagram, then 1690 will make 10 of them. Make sense? That's the odd words of Genesis 1:1 can be represented like this. If you put the evens and the odds together, it's going to represent something like this. You have your Trinity, Father, Son, Spirit. I put the blue Father on top because he's up in the heavens. I have the red Son coming down to earth. I have the gold Holy Spirit being sent forth out. You'll see it's symmetrical. This beautiful, beautiful representation of Genesis 1:1, it's symmetrical on 3 different axes. You can fold it over onto itself. That's just beautiful. Love it. Now, other places where 37, and this is odd, 37. 37 is a prime number. Right? You don't do much with 37. But God, oh my goodness, he loves 3s, he loves 7s, and then 37s he goes crazy with. For example, the word haaretz, the earth, 296 was its total. 296 happens to be a multiple of 37. 37 times 8 is 296. The previous word, va'et. Va'et is 407 total. Guess what? That's 37 times 11. So you say, okay, well, 2 examples of something being divided by 37. Believe me, that's, if you have 7 words, and those 7 words, statistically, if you added different words together, and to check to see if maybe this one and this one together will be divisible by 37, or these 3 will be divisible, the chances of anything in those 7 words being divisible by 37, there should be about 2.5 times it should show up. Here we have 2 in 2 words. Haaretz is divisible by 37, and va'et is divisible by 37. If you'd like some more examples, here's 7 more. You can see the word Hashemayim and Elohim, 395 and 86, together add up to 37 times 13. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll leave it on the screen for a minute. You can pause it and see it. But here, you know, Haaretz and Va'et, 296 and 407 is 37 times 19. So we had those 2 examples, and here's 7 more. And if that's not enough for you, here's 9 more examples of combinations of Genesis 1:1 words that are divisible by 37. It's mind-boggling that all of this would work out like this. And if you still need more examples, here's 5 more. And they go all the way up through and including all 7 words, which is the final example there. You're adding all 7 words together, and that ends up being 37 times 73, his number, and his number backwards, which, remember, was 2701, which was the total of all of Genesis 1:1. Not only does he take those 7 words and put them in all these different combinations that are multiples of 37, when he takes all of those words, he uses each one of those words exactly 12 times. So through all those examples we've just seen, if you sat and counted up how many times did Bereshit show up in all those combinations, it showed up 12 times. Bara showed up 12 times. Elohim showed up 12 times. Et, 12 times. Hashemayim, 12 times. Va'et, 12 times. Haaretz, 12 times. It's too exact. Very cool. Let's go back and look at, I mentioned this at the beginning. Why did God begin the Bible with a bait? Why didn't he begin with Aleph? If that's God's letter, he's out front, he's big. No, he began with a bait. Well, God is actually out in eternity past. And you could actually say that Aleph was actually out in front of Bereshit bara Elohim. You see, there's the Genesis 1:1. I put the Aleph out in front. The letter Aleph is also a word, Aleph, and it spells out. Just like if you spelled the word W, W is a letter, but if you spell it out, D-O-U-B, right, you spell it out. And Aleph, the letter Aleph spells out. It's spelled Aleph, Lamed, Pei. You can hear it. Aleph, Lamed, that's the L sound. Pei. Pei is a P and it's also an F. Just like a lot of our P's sounds, a lot of our words that begin with P have the F sound. Phone, phonetics, okay? So in Hebrew, the Pei will also make an F sound or a P sound at different times. So the word Aleph is Aleph, Lamed, Pei. Aleph, we said, was strength, ox, strength, God's letter. Lamed is the shepherd's crook, shepherd. So you have the first 2, Aleph, Lamed, that's L, that's God. And Pei, its picture is Pei, its ancient picture is a representation of a mouth. So when you have Aleph sitting out in front in eternity past, Aleph, you have Aleph, Lamed, Pei. El, Pei. El is God, Pei, mouth. From the mouth of God. So from the mouth of God comes Bereshit bara Elohim et Hashemayim va'et haaretz. The Aleph sitting out front. You also notice the placement of his Alephs in Genesis 1:1. They show up 6 times. In the first word, it's the third letter. In the second word, it's the third letter. So Aleph shows up in the third letter as the third letter twice. Then Elohim, Aleph begins Elohim, and in the fourth word is et, Aleph begins et. So Aleph shows up first twice. And then at the end, you have va'et, Aleph is second, and haaretz, Aleph is second. So he shows up 3 in the third position twice, first position twice, second position twice. It's showing that Trinity, that they're all equal, okay? And you could probably, if you think about it, I'm toying with, at one point, God the Father, maybe he's the one who, now, I don't know if that, maybe each one of them approached, you had God made man, that was God the Father, was it? And then you had God the Son show up, is Yeshua, and then the Holy Spirit was sent, God the third position. So each one had their, I don't know if that holds, but I know maybe each one had their shot at the earth. Okay. By the way, here's the gematria for Aleph. The Aleph is 1, the Lamed is 30, the Pei is 80. Notice the letter Pei, this is one of those with the final forms. So in this one, you use the one in the parentheses, the Pei in the parentheses. If you flip the alphabet around, that final form Pei is our letter P. Right, the one in parentheses, if you turn the alphabet around there, that's a P. And if you take the other Pei, it does look like a mouth. Okay? But nevertheless, the gematria of Aleph is 111, which again, Aleph is God, it's his strength, and he kind of weaves his Trinity into the gematria values there. And Aleph, by the way, since we're talking about it here, Aleph is actually made up of 3 different Hebrew letters. Notice to make an Aleph, you have to make 3 pen strokes. You make a vertical line or a horizontal line. No, it's not vertical or horizontal. It's diagonal. You make a diagonal line, and then you lift your pen, and then you make the little top piece, and then you lift your pen, and you make the little bottom piece. Even to make the Aleph, there's the triune nature of it by having to make 3 pen strokes. Now, the 3 letters that make up an Aleph, check these out. You actually have 2 yuds and a vav. Okay? For example, you have a yud down below, and that's yud is hand. So imagine the yud down below, that's man, and he's reaching up. And then you have the yud up above, and that's God, and he's reaching down. But my dirty, sinful hand can't reach God's perfect, eternal, infinite, beautiful hand. They will not connect. We need something to connect these two. So what we do is, what's going to connect them is a vav. Remember what vav was? Vav was a nail, and vav was also an upright man. So let's take a vav, an upright man who will humble himself, and this becomes, of course, Yeshua. He's the upright man who humbled himself, letting the hand of God reaching down and the hand of man reaching up, we can connect. Okay? So that's kind of all hidden there, and you can see it. You can see the vav. By the way, a yud, remember the gematria of a yud is 10. The gematria of the other yud is 10. The vav that's on the diagonal is a 6. So even though aleph is 1 and its gematria is 1, its parts, the gematria of its parts, add up to 26. Make sense? Not a coincidence. Yahweh, remember Yahweh, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey? Yud is 10, Hey is 5, that's 15, Vav is 6, we're at 21, and another Hey is another 5, 26. Yahweh, God's name, adds up to 26, and so does the parts of Aleph, add up to 26. Very cool. Oh, here's another cool thing he does in Genesis 1:1. If we take, okay, we have all the gematria values in here, and let's take the number of letters. Well, that's an easy one. There's 28 letters. We've already figured that out. Now I want to take the product of the letters. If you remember from your math, sum is addition, product is multiplication. So I'm going to multiply together the gematria values of all 28 letters. I have it here, 90 times 200 times 1 times 5. I'm starting with Haaretz and working backwards. And I'm going to go all the way through to do until you get to Bereshit. Every letter to the bait, and the bait is 2, is the last letter we're multiplying. When you do that, you come up with this gigundous number, 23 blazillion, whatever the number is. You see at the bottom or on your screen there. Okay, so we got the number of letters and the product of letters. Let's do the same thing for the words. You have the number of words in Genesis 1:1. Well, that's easy, 7. And now the product of the words. The product of the words is we're going to multiply together 913, which is Bereshit, times 203, bara, times 86, times 401, times 395, times 407, times 296. You end up with 304 quintillion. I don't know what's quadrillion. I don't know what's after trillion, but it's 1,000 trillion, 304,000 trillion. Okay, so that's that. Now we're going to put this into this little formula. Very easy. Number of letters times product of letters. Number of words times product of words. I plug those numbers in, 28 times 23 blazillion, divided by 7 times 304,000 trillion. If you work all that out with pencil and paper, you end up getting 3.1415 estimated times 10 to the 17th, which is pi. You remember pi in the circle, 3.1415? God has hidden pi to 5 significant digits in Genesis 1:1. Now you say, well, maybe that's a coincidence. You use that formula. What if you use a different formula? All right, let's take, there's one other verse in the Bible that begins in the beginning. It's in the New Testament, John 1:1. Now, the New Testament is written in Greek. John 1:1, of course, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It turns out that Greek also has numerical values assigned to each of its letters. They don't call it gematria. I forget what they call it. It begins with an I, isa something. Anyway, if you plug in the Greek values to the, just like we did with in this last one with Genesis 1:1, the number of letters in John 1:1, and what do we have in common here? That each of these verses begin in the beginning. If you take the number of letters in John 1:1, it's 52 letters. If you take the product of the letters, you get 8 bazillion, trillion, million. I don't know, it's this massive number. Okay, that's the product of all 52 letters in John 1:1. Now we do the same with the words. There are 17 words in John 1:1 in Greek, and the product of those words is 949 illions. I don't know what you call it. And we're going to use that same formula that we did with the Genesis 1:1. Number of letters times product of letters. That's 52 times 8 bazillion, million, billion. Divided by number of words times product of words. Number of words 17, product of words is 949 billions. It comes out to be 2.7183 estimated times 10 to the 40. And if you have any kind of math background at all, you will recognize that that is the natural logarithm to 5 significant digits. And that number is probably as famous as pi. To a mathematician, there are 2 irrational numbers that are just, they are. Pi is one of them, e they call it, or the natural logarithm is the other one. Both amazing numbers, and for those 2 numbers to show up, only the hand of God could have put it in there, woven it in. Now we've covered Genesis 1:1. I mean, we've talked about it every which way but backwards. I mean, he has something there, a fingerprint. So let's look at it backwards. Before we read it backwards, I want to look at this verse in Deuteronomy 18. Deuteronomy 18:18, God is telling Moses, he says, I will raise up a prophet. God is actually telling Moses to tell the people this, that I will raise up a prophet from among their countrymen like you, Moses. So this is a messianic prophecy. This is letting them know how to know the Messiah when he comes. He's going to be a prophet from among their countrymen, which means he's going to be Jewish, and he's going to be like you, Moses. So all we have to do is let's look to see who shows up that is a prophet, he's Jewish, and he's the most like Moses. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, it's Jesus. Yeshua, I mean, you had Moses, all the babies are thrown in the river or killed, under 2 years of age, the males. In Jesus' time, you had King Herod, had all the babies under 2 years of age killed in Bethlehem. It's that same parallel you have with Moses. He's betrayed, or he's betrayed by his own people. Jesus, he's betrayed by his own people. I mean, it goes on and on and on. You could just do study after just hours of study on the comparisons and parallels between Moses and Jesus. Jesus is that prophet from among their countrymen, most like Moses. But nevertheless, that's what the Jews were supposed to be looking for. The prophet from among their countrymen who is most like Moses. So if you take Genesis 1:1, which we've been looking at over and over and over again here, and I write it backwards. So what I'm going to do is there it is forwards, and then here it is backwards, okay? And the color coding just helps it out there. Now, when I write it backwards, I'm going to re-parse it. Parsing is just where do you put the spaces. So I'm going to change the spaces between the words. When I do that, you end up, and remember we're reading right to left, you have the first 3 letters we ignore for now, and then here's the purple hay. Hay is behold. Behold, something's going to be revealed. The next word is twin or match. The next word is Moshe, Moses. It's written backwards in Genesis 1:1. We saw it when we looked at Hashemayim, and Pharaoh's daughter was pulling Moshe out of the water with her hand. Then you have the word twin or match again, and then you have the word Yah. Yah being short for Yahweh. That is one of his names, Yah. He goes by Yahweh and he goes by Yah. It's like his title. He's Elohim and he's El. So Genesis 1:1 backwards, there's a phrase in there, behold, this is my match, this is my twin. Behold my match, Moses, a match of Yah. Amazing. And now finally, look, Yeah, how many times have you read Genesis 1:1 and you just zip right past it, thinking, okay, in the beginning God created heavens and the earth? But there's so much more if you look at it in the Hebrew. Agreed? Anyway, let's just, one last thing here. The first verse of the Bible, we already said, was Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim va'et haaretz. The first word of the Bible is Bereshit. The first letter of the Bible is Beit. You got it? That's the first. Now let's go to the last letter of the Bible. Well, the last verse of the Bible is in Revelation 22:21. The grace of the Lord Jesus be with you all. Amen. The last word of the Bible is in Greek, and it's Amen. And the last letter of the Bible is the last letter of the word Amen, which in Greek is the Greek letter Nu. In English, it's the N. In Hebrew, it's the Nun. But it's the N sound. Okay? So if you take the first and last, the first is Aleph, the last is to remember. Jesus said, I am the Alpha and Omega. I am the first and the last. The Aleph and the Tav, it's the Et. The first and the last letters of the Bible is a Beit and a Nun. It spells Ben, which is sun. The whole book is about the sun. If you take the first letter and the second letter, Beit Resh, it's Bar, sun. If you take the first letter and the last letter, it's Beit Nun, Ben. It's the sun, the sun, the sun. That's what this book is about, the Son of God. Anyway, to God be the glory. I hope hopefully next time we can move on to verse 2 and see what's packed in there. But God bless you so much for watching. To God be the glory, to God be the honor, to God be the praise. And let me tell you, the rapture is coming. Get ready, folks. See you soon. God bless.